So good morning. We're going to take our first inhale here through the nose. So inhaling through the nose, drop the shoulders, relax the eyelids, and really allow yourself to soften into this space. Giving yourself permission to get as comfortable as you need. Just notice what comfort is available to you. So we're going to just do 2 more rounds of inhales here and exhales, moving as slow as you need to, because the beauty of this is to really lean into the space you're in and get in touch with your body. So today we're going to tap into something that we began building yesterday, which is sensation rather than information. And the breakdown of that really is, how do we use what we have to simplify our life and gain more clarity? How do we discover what we know? How do we know? So for so many of us, when we think about information, we think the more information I have, the clearer and the easier it will be to make a decision. But the thing that we struggle with is, we all know what truth is. And the simple example is, we all know sugar is not good for us, and we continue to eat sugar. So the thing is, it's not about the information we know, but how we're connecting, how we're processing, how we're relating to the information. So much of what we do is intellectual. So this practice is more of a body practice to invite your body more into this experience, allowing yourself to navigate your day using the support of the body itself. So we're going to lean in with allowing rather than making do. So much of the practice we usually have is just surrendering. And surrendering is just almost feels like compromise. So there's a big difference between surrendering and allowing. A simple example of this is in the practice we stepped into yesterday, which was taking something or so either a meal that you had or a conversation you had with somebody, and notice where you were as that person communicated to you. Were you more in your head or more in your body? Were you present? What sensations were available to you as that person communicated? So what we're going to try to discover here is, it's almost like our love language. Each person has a different love language. And how do you know? How do you know when you buy a dress? How do you know what you like to eat? What is it that allows you the intuition? What is it that gives you the insight into either the pleasure and the pain in life? So for each of us, our sensations work differently in the sense of one might dominate more than the other. For some people, it's the eyes. For some people, it's the ears, right? So in seeing, it's what you see. In hearing, it could be a variation of things where you can hear somebody's tone, the pace they're going at, and you can kind of pick up on their energy field through the conversation, through the vocal, and you being able to hear it. Some people, it's through the nose. It's what they smell. And that will indicate everything. It will tell them everything about the experience they're having. And for some people, it's the taste. But for most of us, when we're in our head, it's really, really difficult to be able to even tap into and use the sensations that Hashem has given us, right? Because Hashem didn't just create sensations, right? The sensory experience just because. It's there to be used, and it's there to support us every step of the way. But for so many of us, we've given so much credit to information and conversation rather than the sensation itself. So think back to a conversation that you might have had yesterday with somebody. And going back now with your 5 senses, removing the chatter that was going on in your mind, I want you to notice if your mind was quiet, or as quiet as it is right now. What else do you see? What else is that person telling you? What else is that person expressing? And a lot of times, we come to the table with so much noise in our minds that we're not even able to pick up on what the other person is trying to express. When we step into a conversation with a quiet mind, not assuming anything, clearing the slate, and letting things be exactly what they are, rather than making do, which is a compromise of us trying to suppress judgment or assumptions. When we come to the table relaxed, we're able to really hear what the other person is trying to say, but also we will get the most benefit out of it. In the allowing, there's an openness, there's a transparency that's available. And the conversation is usually a lot deeper. So the simple example that I gave yesterday was thinking about the concept of Superman and Clark Kent, and this sense of Lois Lane not being able to know who he is with or without his glasses. So when he's wearing his glasses, she can't recognize him. And there's this thing where people are like, well, she's not dumb. How doesn't she see who he is? Isn't it so obvious? It's just when he's in the office, he's wearing glasses, and when he's Superman, he's not. How can she not recognize him? When we step into life and we're not using our 5 senses, it's much harder to recognize things. It's much harder to pick up on all sorts of cues, the basic structure of what is available to us. So when we take the time to step into our body and allow rather than make do, it's much easier to be, first of all, comfortable in your own self, but also you're able to process things properly. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try to tap into our senses, but also try to figure out which one, for every single one of you, which of your senses are in the lead. Like, which ones do you trust? For example, for me, it's my ears and my nose. My nose can tell me everything I need to know, and I can trust it. So if something doesn't smell right, rather than going into the story, trying to dig deeper of being like, what's going on there? I just say, I trust my nose, and I keep it simple. As in, something seems off, I don't need to know what it is, but I trust myself. So for every single one of us, it's different. So we're going to do an exercise here, and we're going to try to figure out how you process. So think about a meal. It can be the last meal you've had, or just something that can speak to you where you can tap into your senses easily. And we're going to begin by asking, what eats first? So think of that food. Is it warm or cold? Is there color? Is there texture? Is there smell? Do you smell it before you taste it? Or do you maybe hear the cutlery hit the ceramic plate? What eats first? Now, we'll always have one or two that are dominant. There's one or two sensations that might be in the lead. So now, with this, I want you to ask yourself, what does this food have in common with other foods that you like? Some of us gravitate towards warm foods, spicier foods, simpler foods. And when we're able to eat with all of our senses, we usually in that moment will feel full. So rather than eating while we're on the phone or in a time crunch, it's really sitting in front of a meal. So just notice what it is that you feel might be in the lead. Now, moving into the rest of your day, moving into other things that you do, just notice if that one or two, and again, we're still exploring, because for a lot of us, it's something we haven't really tapped into. Notice the pattern of one or two of those of your senses that have to be consistent in other areas of your life. So it could be, let's say for me, because my nose is such a dominant one, it's I love making product. I love discovering new scents. I love when things smell a very specific way. And that is something that, it's like one of the things that people always comment when they enter my house. The first thing they're like, oh my gosh, this smell. That's always like in the lead. So for some people, it could be the visual. It could be more of a look. And for some people, it's what they hear, the environment they live in the form of sound. So I want you to notice what kind of support this sense of sense, right? Your sense really makes you feel comfortable. Notice how your body begins to relax. And when you're able to use your 5 senses, you're so much more grounded. For a lot of us, we really, really struggle with connecting with our senses. And that's where stories are really created. So we create all these stories that are present in our life because we aren't familiar with our 5 senses and connected to our gut. So the way we familiarize ourselves is through story. But when we're able to quiet the mind and really, really relax into our body, there's a trust that's built. And the environment around us becomes a lot less threatening because you're familiar with the full scope of your intuition. And it's not only about the information that you have to gather to know if something's safe or unsafe, which is more of a space we operate from when we are in our heads rather than in our body. One second. So when we are in our body and we're using the senses, it's so much easier to familiarize ourselves with what is going on without there having to be all this like information seeking and chasing. Like, you don't have to be a detective, but your body automatically becomes a lot more relaxed. Now, when you're aligned, things don't get trapped in the body because there's a flow. Coming back to our initial comment is allowing rather than making do. So last week I shared something really powerful. We didn't get to record it, so I'm gonna add it here because I feel like it was so powerful and it really has so much to do with this. So in Shabbos Shemona Esrei, I was davening Musaf and I was looking at the concept of, it said, Kadcha b'mitzvasacha, Sein chalkeinu b'sorasacha, Sabeinu mituvecha, Samach nafshenu b'shmusacha. Tahar libenu li'avdecha be'emes. Now, if we're going to take that as the formula to create life itself, or the roadmap for life and for happiness, or for spiritual growth, that's the path. So it begins with Kadcha b'mitzvasacha. Kadshenu is we can tap into the sense of the kad, which is a vessel, right? Creating the vessel. So when we create the vessel and we have a vessel available, right? It's like having space. As I talk about in interior designer, the architect creates the space, right? Space is that first element of interior design. Sein Chelkeinu V'Sarasecha is creating the space within the vessel. So Kadshenu is the vessel. Then we create the space in the vessel. Hold on, I'm gonna shut the door. They're beginning to drill. All right, we'll get through this. So, Savenu Mituvecha is satisfying yourself, right? Having that sense of satisfaction. Now, the only way we can fill something is if there's space created. So, to become full in life, it's so important to know how are we doing this? And it's about making sure we have the space for it. And that is where the allowing comes in. So for us to feel completely full, bringing it to today's practice, it's about using your five senses, really quieting the noise down and using the five senses. And when we do that, we are able to create a sense of fullness in a level where we don't struggle with emotional hunger, emotional satisfaction, spiritual satisfaction, because we've actually created the space, right? So then we can have sova, which is satisfaction, right? Is the fullness. And then samach nafshenu v'shuasecha is we can only find that happiness once we are completely full. So fullness actually creates happiness. There's a sense of simcha sachaim that comes from wholeness. So when we do feel kind of that lacking in our life, a lot of times we are struggling with the simple component of not knowing how to satisfy ourselves. But it doesn't mean that we don't have the right things available. It just means that we're not tapping into the five senses, using the tools, creating the space, and making sure our vessel is able to hold what we are able to experience. And then v'taher libenu le'avdecha be'emes, and that's really when the spiritual purity is available to us. Only after we've been able to develop, right? It's almost like a palate, like a flavor for simcha, real simcha, which comes from sova, right? From satisfaction. That's when purity is available to us in its ultimate form. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining me in this meditation.